I came back from my trip without telling a soul. I wanted to surprise them. A Christmas homecoming, the kind you see in old movies. The house was glowing from the street. Golden lights draped across the porch, the faint shimmer of the tree through the window. I could hear laughter coming from the living room. It should have been the happiest sound in the world. I left my suitcase quietly by the door. For a moment, I just stood there, listening. The laughter felt strange, like a song I once loved, but couldn't recognize anymore. On the balcony upstairs, I saw Claire, my wife, standing still, her hand gripping the railing. Her shoulders trembled. She wasn't laughing, she was crying, softly, silently. The tree lights flickered across her face like tiny heartbreaks of color. Inside, my son, my only son, Stephen, was holding a glass of wine, smiling, making a toast with people I barely recognized. Amanda's family, the in-laws, and there I was, a man standing outside his own home, watching his life unfold without him. Nobody even noticed I was back. Not my wife, not my son, not the people eating food I'd paid for, sitting under lights I'd hung, in the home I'd built. That's the moment I understood, without hearing a word. But to explain how I ended up there, how a man who built an empire returned to find his family quietly stolen from him, I need to take you back. Because revenge, when it comes, doesn't have to scream. Sometimes it whispers. And when it's precise, it can be devastatingly silent. My name is Michael Anderson, and I'm 62 years old. I own a chain of boutique hotels in the Florida Keys, 6 properties, each one built with my bare hands and sleepless years. When I started 30 years ago, people laughed. Luxury tourism in the Keys, they said. Nobody will pay that kind of money to stay here. They were wrong. Today, those 6 hotels generate more than $40 million a year. A dream turned into an empire, and an empire that came with a cost. My wife Claire is 58. We married 35 years ago, when all I had was a borrowed pickup truck and an idea too big for the time I lived in. She believed in me before anyone else did. In the early days, she worked beside me, scrubbing floors, washing linens, checking in guests with a smile even when we couldn't pay the electric bill. She was the strength behind every brick of my success. We have one son, Stephen, 32 years old, an architect, at least on paper. In reality, I'm not sure he's ever worked a full year in his life. He always had excuses: the market, the clients, the economy. There was always something in progress, something almost happening. Then 4 years ago, he married Amanda, a beautiful woman, charming, educated, and from a family with deep old money in New York. Since that wedding, something in our family quietly shifted. At first, it was subtle. Then, it became impossible to ignore. Stephen began to drift away. The phone calls came less often. The visits became rare. Whenever Claire asked about coming home, he'd say, "Amanda's family needs her close, Mom." You understand, right? Understand? I tried, but I also noticed he hadn't landed a single architectural project in almost 2 years. So I'd ask, "What works, Stephen?" "You don't have clients." He'd sigh, frustrated. "I'm networking, Dad. Building connections." Connections didn't pay the bills, so I paid them. Month after month, I sent him money. What started as small support turned into full dependency, because Amanda had standards: an Upper East Side apartment, a European car, vacations in France, and my son, weak, well-meaning, but spineless, couldn't tell her no. Claire saw it. She saw him slipping away. Our son, the same boy who used to build sandcastles beside me in Key Largo. Now we only saw him through photos online. Our grandchildren, 2-year-old twins, existed more on Instagram than in real life. Whenever Claire mentioned the pain of missing them, Stephen had a rehearsed answer. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're busy. We'll visit when we can." They never did. Except when they needed something, money for an investment, a medical emergency, an advance on inheritance. And I gave it. Every time. Because that's what fathers do, right? They help. Even when it hurts. This year, I needed space. A break. I told Claire I'd travel to Europe for business. A scouting trip, maybe expand our brand into the Caribbean. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4. I'll be home before Christmas, I promise. I left in mid-November. For 2 weeks, things were fine. Claire sent photos. The garden, the ocean, our house glowing under the sunset. Small messages that made the distance easier. Then something changed. The texts became shorter. The calls, colder. When I called, she sounded distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yes, of course." "Why? You sound distant." "It's your imagination, Michael. I'm just tired." But my gut told me otherwise. So 3 days before Christmas, I made a decision. I'd come home early. No warning, no call. I'd surprise her, see with my own eyes what was happening. I landed in Key West at sunset, December 23rd. The air was warm, the ocean silver, under the fading sky. I told the taxi driver to stop at the gate. I wanted to walk the rest of the way. The house, our house, glowed from top to bottom. Christmas lights sparkled in the palms, soft music floated through the air. I could hear laughter inside. I smiled, at first. Then I heard a familiar voice, louder than the rest. "Stephen, what was my son doing here?" He was supposed to be in New York with Amanda's family, so why did it sound like they were all in my living room instead? I stood at the front door for a long moment, hand on the handle, heart pounding harder than it should have. The laughter inside rolled through the walls, warm, careless, familiar. I dreamed of coming home to that sound. But now, it felt wrong, almost cruel. I eased the door open. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon drifted toward me, wrapped in the soft glow of Christmas lights. Every detail looked perfect. Too perfect. Even the tree shimmered like a magazine photo. In the living room, a dozen people stood around the fireplace, glasses raised. Stephen was in the center, telling a story, his hand resting on Amanda's back like they owned the room. My wife, Claire, sat on the edge of the sofa, smiling the kind of smile that hides exhaustion. And me? I was invisible, a ghost in my own home. I didn't speak. I wanted to see, to understand, before I said a word. Stephen lifted his glass. "To family," he said, "to new beginnings." Everyone clinked their glasses. Except Claire. Her hand shook slightly. That's when Amanda turned, noticing me by the doorway. Her smile froze. "Michael," she said, startled. The room went silent. All those polished people turned toward me like statues suddenly waking. "Dad," Stephen stammered, eyes wide. "You're back?" "Surprise," I said softly. Setting my bag down, I tried to smile. It didn't feel right. Claire stood, her voice trembling. "You're early. We we weren't expecting you. I can see that." I stepped closer, my shoes sinking into the expensive rug. The silence was deafening. I looked at my son. Expensive watch, perfect posture, the kind of confidence money buys, but character can't hold. "So," I said, forcing calm into my voice, "you decided to spend Christmas here after all." Stephen cleared his throat. "Amanda's family wanted to see the keys, and Mom insisted they stay here. We thought you'd still be in Europe." I nodded slowly. Europe ended early. Then, looking at Amanda, I added, "Business meetings can be unpredictable, like family reunions apparently." A polite laugh rippled through the room, the kind people make when they wish they were somewhere else. Dinner was awkward. Every word carried tension. Amanda's father tried small talk about real estate. Her mother complimented the decorations, and Stephen kept glancing at me like a child waiting for permission to speak. Claire avoided my eyes. Her hand kept brushing her wedding ring like it burned. Finally, I set down my fork. "So tell me, Stephen, what's this new beginning you toasted to earlier?" He froze. Amanda smiled too quickly. "Just family things, Michael. You've been working so hard. We didn't want to bother you." I looked at her, then at my wife. "Claire?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Stephen and Amanda are moving down here. They want to help with the company." The words hit like ice water. "Help," I repeated. "Stephen hasn't run a lemonade stand successfully, Claire." Amanda's tone sharpened. "With respect, Michael, Stephen has vision. Your hotels need modernization, better branding, new management. Investors trust younger faces now." I studied her, poised, articulate, confident in a way that only entitlement can teach. Stephen shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, Amanda's father knows people. They can help expand into new markets." So that was it. They weren't visiting. They were positioning. The family I'd built was turning into a business deal I hadn't signed. After dinner, I found Claire on the balcony, staring at the sea. The night wind tangled her hair, and her eyes looked tired, too tired for pretending. "Claire," I said quietly, "how long have you known?" She didn't turn. "Known what?" "That they were coming here to take over. That they were planning something behind my back." Her silence was answer enough. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "They said it was just temporary. A visit." Then they started talking about ideas, investors, rebranding. I didn't think it meant replacing me. She turned then, eyes shining. "Michael, you've worked non-stop for 30 years. You barely breathe without checking stock reports. Maybe it's time you let Stephen try." "Try what?" "Destroy everything I built because he can't say no to his wife." She flinched. "You don't know him anymore." I sighed. "And whose fault is that?" We stood in silence, the ocean whispering below like a secret neither of us wanted to face. Finally, she whispered, "They're planning to rename it the Anderson Group, to Bianco Anderson, after Amanda's family." My stomach turned. I looked at her, the woman who'd built this empire beside me, and asked, "Did you agree to that?" She didn't answer. That's when I realized it wasn't just my business that had been invaded. It was my marriage, my home, my peace. That night, while they all slept, I sat alone in my study, staring at old photos. Me and Claire, painting walls in our first hotel. Stephen, as a boy, asleep on a pile of towels, dreaming of castles. I opened my laptop and began typing. A new folder. Project Winter Sun. I wasn't sure what it would become yet. Revenge, redemption, or both. But I knew this. Whatever they'd planned, they wouldn't see me coming. Because silence, when you've earned it, can be the sharpest weapon of all. If you're still here with me, tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you came home to that? I really want to know your thoughts. And hey, if you're feeling the story, take 15 seconds right now, hit that subscribe button, and join me for the next chapter. I'll wait. All right, let's continue. I didn't sleep that night. Not a second. The sound of the ocean outside used to calm me. That night, it sounded like laughter. Soft, cruel, mocking. I sat there in the study, surrounded by the life I'd built. Awards, photographs, models of every hotel I'd ever opened. And I realized something painful. I'd built everything except trust. By dawn, I already had a plan. The next morning, I made breakfast, calmly, deliberately, like nothing had happened. Claire came down first, eyes red, wearing one of my shirts like she used to in the early days. "Did you sleep?" she asked quietly. I smiled. I didn't need to. Stephen joined a few minutes later, followed by Amanda, both dressed like they were heading to a meeting. Not breakfast in their parents' home. They exchanged awkward good mornings. I poured coffee for everyone. "We have a big day ahead," I said. Amanda tilted her head. "A big day?" "Yes," I said. "You mentioned investors. I'd like to meet them." Her eyes flickered, a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Oh, I don't think—" "Stephen," I interrupted, "you said you wanted to modernize the company. I'm open to hearing your proposal." That was the first lie, the bait. Stephen looked thrilled. "Really? You mean it?" I smiled. "Of course. I've been waiting for you to take responsibility for something other than spending." Claire winced at the edge in my voice. Amanda didn't. She smiled, slow and confident. "Perfect. We'll set it up." And that's when I knew she believed she was already winning. 3 days later, I met them at my main office in Key Largo. They arrived 15 minutes late. Amanda in a designer suit, Stephen carrying a tablet, clearly prepped by her. Amanda led the presentation. She spoke about rebranding the company to attract younger investors, building an international identity, and modernizing the hospitality experience. She used all the right buzzwords. Halfway through, I stopped her. "Amanda," I said, "I've built 6 hotels from scratch. Tell me, what's the first rule of hospitality?" She smiled, confident. "Comfort?" "No," I said softly. "Truth." The room went silent. "Because without truth," I continued, "you can decorate all you want, but it's still an empty room." Stephen shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, come on, this isn't—" I cut him off. "You didn't tell me Amanda's family was planning to invest through their holding company. Why hide that?" Amanda's voice hardened. "Because we didn't want to burden you with details." "Details?" I said, leaning forward. "Like transferring shares into your name?" Her face froze. Stephen's eyes widened. "Dad!" I stood. "You forget, Stephen. I built this company. Every document crosses my desk before it moves. You should have checked who signs the approvals." Amanda's jaw tightened. "You don't trust us," she said flatly. I smiled faintly. I trust actions, Amanda. Words are for marketing. That night, I went back to the house, alone. Claire had gone to her charity event. The others stayed in town, meeting with partners. I poured myself a drink and opened the family computer in my study. I shouldn't have, but I did. Curiosity isn't a weakness, it's how empires survive. I found an email chain between Stephen and Amanda. It wasn't just about rebranding, it was a transfer plan. Legal documents in draft form, using my signature from an old scan. They were planning to move two of my most profitable hotels, Blue Horizon and Seacrest, under a joint family trust. A trust that didn't include me. They'd been preparing it for months. I stared at the screen, feeling my pulse slow, not from anger, but from understanding. So that's what they'd been building, an empire within an empire. And they were going to steal it quietly. When Claire came home, I didn't mention it. She looked tired, maybe from guilt, maybe from pretending everything was fine. I didn't press. Instead, I started preparing, not for confrontation, but correction. I called my attorney the next morning, an old friend, Mark Hughes. Mark, I said, I need to make a few structural changes, quietly. Think of it as a little insurance. He chuckled. Trouble in paradise? Let's call it stormproofing. Within 48 hours, every one of my companies was restructured into private trusts under my direct control. Every property title, every account, every license, rerouted. And then I waited. Because revenge doesn't need speed. It needs patience. The kind of patience I learned from decades of delayed success and quiet betrayal. 3 nights later, I invited everyone for dinner again. This time, I played host, calm, gracious, even generous. I made their favorite, grilled lobster with lemon butter and Claire's old recipe for bread pudding. Amanda arrived glowing with confidence. Stephen looked nervous, but excited. They thought they'd outsmarted me. Halfway through the meal, I raised my glass. To family, I said softly. Amanda smiled. To progress. I smiled back. Yes, to progress. Then I turned to Stephen. Son, I read your proposal. Impressive work, especially the part where my name disappears from the company records. The color drained from his face. Dad, I can explain. You don't have to, I said. I already did. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a small envelope, and slid it across the table. Inside was a letter. Effective immediately, I said. Your access to all company assets is revoked. That includes the corporate cards, accounts, and company vehicles. Amanda's smile vanished. This is insane, she hissed. You can't. I can, I said. And I did. Stephen's voice cracked. Dad, why? Because I gave you everything, and you tried to take the only thing I had left. My name. Claire covered her mouth, tears spilling. Amanda pushed back from the table, furious. You'll regret this? I stood. No, I said quietly. I regret waiting this long. That night, they left the house. No goodbyes, no apologies, just silence. The same silence I'd carried for years, finally returning the favor. But I knew it wasn't over, because people like Amanda never leave without taking one last piece. And when she came back, and she would, I had to be ready. Soft tone, reflective pause. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Tell me below, would you forgive them, or would you do the same? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if you're enjoying these emotional life stories, take 15 seconds right now to hit subscribe. Go ahead. I'll wait. All right, let's continue. For 2 weeks, the house was silent. No calls, no messages, no footsteps on the stairs. Claire moved through the rooms like a ghost, setting the table for two, but only pouring 1 cup of coffee. I didn't ask if she'd spoken to Stephen. I didn't need to. The guilt in her eyes said enough. Then, one rainy Thursday morning, I heard tires crunching on the driveway. Through the window, I saw a white car, Amanda's. She stepped out, alone. No makeup this time, no polished smile, just pale skin, a coat too thin for the cold, and eyes that looked older than before. I opened the door before she could knock. "Michael," she said softly. "Back for another business meeting?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just stood there, shivering. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. The rain followed her inside like an unwanted guest. We sat in the kitchen, the same table where I'd signed every check that kept their life afloat. She stared at her hands. "I didn't come to argue," she said quietly. "I came to tell you the truth." I leaned back. "That's new." She flinched. "I deserve that. But please just listen." For a long time, she said nothing. Then finally, "Stephen didn't know everything. The documents, the transfers, they weren't his idea. They were mine." "I know," I said. Her eyes widened. "You knew." "Of course. You're clever, Amanda, but you're not invisible." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then why didn't you stop me sooner?" I looked at her, really looked. The sharp confidence was gone. In its place was something fragile, human. "Because," I said softly, "I wanted to see how far greed would take you before guilt pulled you back." She wiped her cheek, trembling. "It wasn't just greed. It was fear. Stephen, he's drowning, Michael. He's lost. He can't provide, can't lead. I thought if I took control, if I built something, maybe I could save him." "By destroying me?" "By protecting him," she whispered. Her voice broke. "He never wanted this." "I did. I pushed him." "The letter." She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is from Stephen," she said. "He asked me to bring it." I took it, hesitating. Her eyes searched mine. "He's in rehab, Michael. He's been drinking. Pills." The pressure got to him. I stared at the letter, my chest tightening. "He wanted to tell you himself, but he was ashamed," she said. "He thinks he disappointed you." I opened the envelope slowly. The letter was handwritten, shaky, tear-stained. "Dad, I know I failed you. I failed Mom. I failed Amanda. I failed myself. You gave me everything, and I thought I had to live up to it, not learn from it. Amanda didn't steal from you. I let her because I thought she could fix what I couldn't. Please don't hate her. She did what I should have done. Fight for something. I just fought the wrong way. I'll get better. I promise. I want my son to know his grandfather. Please don't give up on me yet. Loves, Stephen." The words blurred as I read them. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd spent my whole life building hotels, and somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten to build a son. Amanda stood. "I'll leave you alone now." She turned toward the door. "Amanda," I said quietly, "wait." She stopped, her back trembling. I walked to the window. staring at the grey sky. You said you did this to protect Stephen. Do you still love him? Yes, she whispered, more than anything. Then prove it, I said. Not with money, with honesty. She looked at me, confused. I've set up a trust, I continued, for Stephen and the twins, but you won't touch a cent unless you both work for it. I'll give him one last chance to learn what value means. Her voice broke. Why would you do that for me? For him, I said, and for Claire. And because maybe, just maybe, forgiveness isn't a transaction. Amanda cried openly then, not like a villain, but like a woman who'd lost too much too soon. She nodded, whispered a thank you, and left without another word. That night, I sat on the porch as the storm cleared. Claire joined me, holding 2 cups of coffee. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she said, Stephen called. I nodded. I know. He's getting help, she said softly. He wants to make things right. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and rain. For the first time in months, the ocean sounded peaceful again. I'm glad, I said. Then, after a pause, Claire, I don't know if we can go back to the way things were. She looked at me, eyes gentle. Maybe we don't have to. Maybe we just start again. Older, quieter, but still together. I smiled. Starting over at 62. Who would have thought? She leaned her head on my shoulder. You've rebuilt everything else, Michael. Why not us? And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an empire builder or a businessman. I just felt like a man, tired, flawed, but finally free.